Welcome to those of you who have just joined. We will be kicking this off momentarily. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sasha Basho, and we're grateful that you're joining us on a topic called equity and compensation. We are going to try and be succinct and stay on time, which is not always easy on this topic because part of the goal of this series was to extend the Society of Information Managers own diversity and inclusion initiative. And really it's about taking on some different topics. So we kicked off a DEI event in May, and out of that we kicked off a women's lunch series, knowing that most women are wearing many hats in their homes. So we wanted to make sure that we created accessibility for people and then also give them access to folks that have walked the path before to ask those tough questions. So on that note, the three topics that we're going to really try and focus in on today are really kind of what is the current state of compensation, so we know where we sit today, the challenges that women specifically face in equalizing that, because there's some things we can control and there's some things that, you know, while the rest of the companies and the cultures catch up, but there are some things that specifically we can control, and then ideas for change. And what we're really hoping today is that you're going to take away some type of an outcome or a takeaway that will help you in your career or in hiring. But we want to make sure that we're really extending the information and perspectives so that we can help and develop that in our community, specifically in the Portland area. So on that note, Jordan, do you want to just take a quick minute to talk about SIM for those who are on the call and may not know who we are?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. So by introduction, my name is Jordan Sanga. I'm actually the current CIO at Oregon PERS, and also the program director for SIM Chapter Portland. So I do want to welcome folks that are not familiar with SIM. I do want to extend an invitation for the folks that are on this call. If you're not a member, please see me or anyone else on the board, even Sasha, if you have some questions about becoming a member. I would love you to be involved. I'm very proud and excited to kick this off with Sasha. So this is a series, the first session of 3 series this summer. Currently, we're on somewhat of a hiatus for programs, so we're taking the summer off. But with these, we're actually trying to push some of the programs as much as you can during the summer. But we'll start back up again in full earnest in September. So we're excited and also planning for that. If you have any ideas that SIM could maybe look into, please let me know. I'll be definitely interested in researching, and maybe we can present something in a future chapter meeting. So I want to welcome, and I want to thank Sasha and the panel members this afternoon.
Thanks, Jordan. As Jordan mentioned, SIM is a very flexible organization. Jordan is responsible for programs, and we are continuing to, like I said, to try and nurture and develop the leadership talent in technology in our community. This is specifically the Portland Vancouver chapter. So if you do have ideas or feedback, all is welcomed. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and move on to our program. We have a great panel for you today. And in the interest of time, instead of having everybody introduce themselves, I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick brief bio on this great set of ladies who have joined us and agreed to share their perspectives and their journeys on a number of topics. So first we have Linda, and it's Vega Sa, which I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. She's currently the CIO of the Mount Hood Community College. She brings to this conversation 17 years of C-level experience, both in the nonprofit and public sector area in technology. So she really was a groundbreaker if you think about that time where sitting alone in a room with a lot of people, right, that didn't look like her. So we're very excited to hear about her journey. She's also recognized by the folks that have worked with her for being extremely capable in the areas of strategy, technology, and project delivery. So thank you, Linda, for joining us. Next, we have Juliet Valdez, and she's the Senior Talent Acquisition Manager for the Oregon Lottery. She brings close to 20 years of recruiting in the higher education and public sector space. And most recently, she joined the lottery, that was with the lottery as well as Willamette University. She brings expertise in the field of recruiting around strategy, assessment and selection, right? And then and retention. So thank you, Juliet, for joining us. And then we have Titu Harahara, who is a senior IT project lead with the Oregon Lottery just recently. She just made a move. She brings 15 years of experience in the IT project management space. She also covers different areas and functions of the business around sales, marketing, and product management. She's a past president of the PMI, which is the Project Management Institute for the Portland chapter. And she currently is our assistant director for SIM for programs. So thank you, Titu, for joining this conversation. So what we thought would be important today is to have a level set. This is a topic, there's many people having this conversation, but we thought, you know, it's important for us as a group before we get into the topic about what specifically is the problem. And it's really what we are going to focus in on today is really the wage gap. So in 2018, there was a census, and I think this is interesting. So for the average white male, for the dollar they earned, this is the percentage that you would see across the other segments for women. White women make 79 cents for every dollar, Black women, 62 cents, Hispanic Latino, 54 cents, Asian, 90 cents, and American Indian and Alaskan Native, 57 cents. So a really big gap. And specifically, if we look at minority women, right? Other than just having a gender difference, but coming from minority classifications. So this was the most recent data that I could find, but as you can see, we still have a ways to go. The good news is we're heading in the right direction for most of us. But we want to truly have this conversation, say, okay, here's what we're dealing with. And I think this is where the greater impact happens. You know, as more households, why is my screen? Sorry, everybody, my screen is not wanting to move. So I have interesting internet in a hotel. Let's see if I can get this to move. Well, I'll just share until it decides to move. We have what this really means, right? For as we see more households being led by women, is when you start to look at the dollars that those households generate over a 40-year career, that's where the results start to get scary. So you're seeing $500,000 to $1 million gaps in lifelong earnings, depending on the minority or the group that these women sit in. And I think that's the biggest impact to our society, right? Children sit in those households. Money usually is about access and giving people opportunity. So this gap, though it might only look like a few cents here, over a lifetime career really starts to become significant to our community and to our households. So apparently my computer is not going to agree with me on this screen share. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and move on to our panel because I know that's what you really want to hear. Those are the people that you want to hear from. So to kick us off, what we thought we'd do is share this topic and talk about the journey, specifically these women's stories. And what I thought was an interesting statistic, and I think something to keep in mind when we're having this conversation, is that when women have a higher representation in C-suite positions, the results and the return to the shareholders are 34% higher. And that's really a key statistic. So when organizations are saying, why should we put diversity initiatives in place, right? This is one of the reasons they want to do that. Why? There's more collaboration and basically return to the investors, not just in communities, right, but as in companies. So on that note, I'm going to ask Linda to kind of field my first question here. Okay. So Linda, can you share with us some of your observations, either organizationally or personally, that you have experienced from a challenge perspective in both your career when it comes to this topic of compensation and equity?
Sure. There's so many things that come to mind, but I guess I will just start with, for me, when I first started in IT, it was extremely male dominated, much more than now. So it was really hard to break into what I thought was like the club, like how do I get in there? I want to be there so bad. So thankfully there was mentors and people around. But I think once I got in there, then there was a little bit of a fear and a hesitation to put my true thoughts on things forward or to say something that was different than the norm. Honestly, for fear of being like kicked out of the club. We wanted to be there so bad. And then I think one of the challenges was a lot of times putting things forward that might have been ideas that were different than what the norm was, or wanting to collaborate more across the board with people. People just looking at things like, what are you doing? That's not how we do things here. And so it puts a lot of doubt in your mind that maybe that's not the right way to do. People are looking at me like I'm crazy. But I think the challenge was just to have the confidence to continue going down that path, because if you felt strongly that this was a better way to do it, or how am I going to figure these things out if I don't talk to the right people? So there was a lot of it sounds real simple putting it into words, but there was a lot of crazy things that happen. Like, you say something and it gets ignored, and somebody says the exact same thing, and it's like the most brilliant thing in the world. So just taking that in, and just kind of fighting for that it's okay to be different and have the confidence to do something different than what's been done in the past. So I mean, I think that was a lot of the struggle over the years as I worked through the various positions, especially because it was so strongly male dominated. And I also have to put out there that one of my strongest mentors was a male. So it's not just a male female thing. There are some really strong advocates and mentors that are men. So but it was hard at the beginning, for sure.
So from an organizational perspective, Linda, was there anything that you saw occur, or were there any breakthroughs, right, where you saw that shift?
I think the more collaboration and communication was huge, to just put things out there, and then people couldn't really doubt the facts that were happening. So I saw some shift in that, and then people stepping up and supporting things. I see a lot more of that now. But I think that made the difference on quite a bit of things, was just the communication and the persistence to keep doing it, keep communicating, keep the message out there, and advocate for others that I saw doing the same thing, to give them the confidence to keep going and keep moving in that direction, type of thing.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So Juliet, do you want to take that question on yourself?
Yeah. Gosh, so I'll approach it in the two levels, so personal and then the organizational challenges. So starting off personally, so in 2008, I got my first job offer. It was my first professional job, straight out of college in my early 20s. I was only offered $30,000 in Orange County. I got that email and I got that offer. I get goosebumps talking about this story. My first thought was, how am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to pay for groceries, my rent, my student loans? How do I do this? If I were to go back in time, I would approach it in a totally different way. I won't dive into it now. I think we'll be able to cover that later. But end of the story was I negotiated. I was in my early 20s. I was so nervous, but I knew that I had to put myself out there to take care of me. So I negotiated it. I didn't get as much as I wanted, but the end result was I was able to increase it to $33K. And you know what? The fact that I spoke up and I had an Excel sheet and talked about, here are my bills, this is what it is, I'm not going to be able to live. I had to ask for what I wanted and what I needed. So that's kind of my maybe personal story when it comes to, pay equity and just compensation. When it comes to the organizational challenges, organizations, we have a workforce of about 3 to 4 generations. And to me, what that means is that we've allowed too many years of inequity of pay to catch up and fix. And I wish it was an easy fix, but it's not, unfortunately. And I'm one that's like, okay, if I want something, I'm going to go and get it. What do I need to do? Right. But I've had to step back and understand the history. Why are we getting, why is it like this? And so, when I'm looking at, when it comes to organizational changes, we have to also think about, what are our current employees getting within a company? What's their compensation like? How are they being considered in pay equity? And also looking at what are the current practices a company follows to ensure that, there's a pay equity framework for moving forward in hiring. So I think, I think when it comes to organizational challenges, it's dealing with the past and how do we move forward and consider what we've done in the past. So that's it.
So Julia, I'm going to ask you maybe to give a little bit more detail. So because you're on the recruiting side,
Yeah.
and you brought up the fact that, look, we're in a system that we can't necessarily fix overnight.
Yeah.
What might someone who's looking at a new job ask?
Yeah.
Right?
Good. Yep. Good
Uncover
question.
that they're, going to align themselves with an organization that has this as a top initiative and actually has some systems and processes in place, right? That's trying to fix the problem within their own organization.
Yeah. Simple question. Be able just ask, what framework do you have for pay equity? Tito and I worked really close together, and I was able to get some history behind that and kind of share, what we did at Oregon Lottery. So I started Oregon Lottery a little over a year ago, and this is all very new to me. I'm a recruiter at heart. I'm a talent acquisition person at heart. When it comes to compensation and pay, it is something that I'm learning. What I had to do was understand the history. And so we've identified there's some pay equity issues, not just with lottery, but state of Oregon, right? So what we need to do is figure out that pay equity framework. And I can't remember what year it was, but we worked with Department of Justice, DOJ, to create a framework for us that can help guide us in, what's that pay equity framework look like, where we group people, current employees and new hires in similar roles. Like, what are they going to do? And we have to look at the group and what that compensation looks like within the group. Now, it might come out with an offer that, that the new hire might not be happy with, but it is a step to creating that pay equity moving forward. And what we want that long term. We want to make sure we create that. So ask that question. What does your pay equity framework look like? Just see what they say.
And you come from predominantly, I think, public sector education, both private and public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So would there be any difference in the way that you would ask that question given a private sector entity versus a public sector entity?
I don't think so. I think it's such a simple question, right? Just what's your pay equity framework? And it could be different, the approaches, right? A private company versus a public may have a different way of approaching it, but I think it should be out in the open, and I think they should be able to, say, well, this is how it works, and this is how we come up with the offer. And I just think it should be open. So it could be, it's just a simple question. Yeah.
I guess if nothing else, if they don't have one, that's an indicator that you may want to be looking at someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So great. Well, thank you very much for that input. So Titu, how about you? Can you please share some of your journey related to this topic around the challenges that you face both at the personal level and organizational level on the topic of equity and compensation?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and hi everybody. To me personally, I think when I look at my journey, whether it was in project management or any other profession that I've had in the last 12 plus years, I would say self-advocacy. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to find, like Juliet and Linda were saying, find your mentor, find that person who is there for you to support you. And, if you look at it, at the core of it, we are all either wives, daughters, sisters, sibling, whatever you want to call it. Women have there's equal, right? So in terms of our people that we work with, whether it's our husband or like Juliet was saying, when you go talk to a person and say, what does your pay equity look like? If they're not sure of what they're saying, keep it simple and say, if it were your daughter or if it were your wife or your sister, how would you approach this? How would you approach pay? Would, equal to equal? And that's something that that would resonate with everybody. Then, it brings a perspective right there to say, treat like how you would like to be treated everybody else, whether it's, you're getting into the job market with the first job, and talk about it, ask for it, ask and say, like Juliet presented, this is what it looks like for me to live off of. How do you expect me to? So, and also do your market research. There's various resources to talk, and then find out, get the numbers, and then advocate for yourself. So I have had the fortune, I would say, of quite a few mentors who have been there for me in coaching me the way that I need to go about it, negotiate. So that's core of it. That's the basics of it. So that's pretty much how I would say it's not been easy, but get to that place, work it. So.
Well, and I think that I know you and I've had several conversations offline, and we've discussed how compensation isn't necessarily always money. It can also be part of like your work environment and things. Do you want to maybe share a few thoughts related to how you view compensation when you're looking at a job or a role?
Absolutely. It took a pandemic for everybody to, whether it's a Zoom call or whether it's online or telecommuting, it took a pandemic to get us there. But I've had the fortune, I'm not looking at, sometimes I'm able to negotiate telecommuting as an option, telework, flexibility as an option. Women have multiple roles, not just, working, they also have a family and they have kids. So how are you able to flex that? So I would say sometimes it's not just dollar to dollar. If I'm able to get some flexibility, and if the company is willing to do that, I take that as an advantage. Whether you want to balance your work-life balance, your family, or going back to school, sometimes that's the reason why you want to have the flexibility. So I think that really helps. So
Can you talk a little bit, again, I'm going to go off some of our past, Can you talk a little bit about who your supporters were when you were going through some of your negotiations? Because you've recently gone through a couple of them.
Yes. So yeah, thank you.
Some of the things, some of the advice that you were given.
Yeah.
When you were in that negotiation.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, personally, again, for me, it's that we all have our top 5, they are your top 5 mentors, whether it's somebody who's giving you professional advice, personal advice, work-related, compensation, right? And for me, I've had quite a few. And if you're able to get like somebody who is in a leadership position, in a senior manager position, whether it was with your current or previous job, whom you have looked up to, right? And reach out to them and say, hey, this is something that I need help with. This is something, what are your thoughts on it? Give me some, is this the right approach? So having that conversation, being vulnerable and opening it up would really help, right? And for me, I would say during the pandemic, I was fortunate to get a job where they were able to give me telecommute as an option, and also work with me to get the trainings as much as I can remotely. So that really helped. And in terms of a compensation, all I would say is it's not just going for just a salary, but negotiate if there's an opportunity for bonuses. What are the metrics? How do we get there? And again, having the conversation really helps. Ask questions. It's okay. Sometimes they might say, I even asked, is there a sign-on bonus during the pandemic? There's nothing wrong with it. If it is there, they're going to give you, and then they will actually support you by saying, oh, I'm glad you asked for that. Without asking, you never know what you're going to get. So, and then with the most recent one with Lottery, when I just joined, I would say we talked quite a bit about pay equity, Juliet and I was trying to understand how that works, and she was able to explain it to me. And again, I wasn't, even she was saying, kudos to you for asking and negotiating, but at the same time, this is our pay equity, this is our framework. And then she was able to explain it to me. So I think just ask, There's nothing wrong in asking, and then see where it gets you. So yeah.
Great. So really quickly, a housekeeping thing I forgot. If you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will try to get to it. We are quickly running out of time. So I'm going to move us along since we've only gotten really to the first question. I will add kind of as a bridge, my personal experience, and I would advise this. So what's interesting, because it's a nice lead into our next question, which has to do with women's psychology on this topic. So first of all, in the Kinstry report, I want to quote, which is, men are often hired for their potential. Women are usually hired for their experience and track record. And I think that plays out into our psychology. So one of the things that we wanted to address on this topic, and you heard it in the earlier responses, was asking. I will tell you, in the last negotiations that I went through, which was a few years ago, I actually practiced with my husband. Because what was interesting is it's not hard for me personally to ask for other people. I found it really difficult. And even after 30 years of selling and sales leadership, I literally had to practice 15 minutes before I went into my final negotiation. And I'm not quite sure why, but I thought I'd share that as a point of vulnerability, because do understand that there is something about pushing those boundaries that many of us are still uncomfortable with. And so think about practices that you can do. So my next question was, and I'm going to direct this to Titu since you just wrapped this, can you give us some insight on the psychological barriers that you personally faced or observed when it comes to this conversation?
Yeah. So for me personally, like similar to what you said, Sasha, I had a good sounding board, but even to get there, like various scenarios, I literally discussed various scenarios. How would I approach this? If they were to tell me I don't have flexibility here, what else can I get, right? But it's not about just compensation or money, but it's also the intangible benefits when it comes to talking about pay equity, right? And for me personally, I would say having a really strong influence here, having a support system really helped. But not all of us have that. So what can we do in terms of, the psychological barriers, right? Find a mentor, find somebody who can really help you. And if you're not able to, then I would say, join like something in your area of expertise, like Society for Information Management or Project Management Institute, or for human resources, they have their own professional organization. Find that person for helping you to overcome that barrier. Do your research and be confident. And at the same time,
I say practice. One thing that if you've ever been in sales, you know that you role play.
Yep, and practice. Yes.
You're asked.
Yes, you have to learn to ask, and that comes just from, self-advocacy. So, yeah.
So, Linda, I'm going to ask you the same thing, right? Being an executive leader for the number of decades you've had, you've been in a unique position to influence culture, right? What are some maybe the psychological barriers that you've observed in the women that have either worked for you or for yourself when it comes to this topic?
I think the statistic that you quoted about men being hired for potential and women for their experience is very, very true. And I think that we tend to think that way ourselves. At least I did when I was looking at a job that was like a stretch job, something new. I would focus in instantly and, oh my gosh, I haven't done that. I know so-and-so is going to apply for this and they have, but I would just focus in on what I haven't done as opposed to the experiences that I have. And I also had mentors who pushed me to, yeah, you can do it, just go for it. So I think that's a tendency that we have to overcome, is to, you won't get 100% of everything, but probably neither is anyone else that's applying for the job. So be confident in the experiences that you have. And I think know what your boundaries are. Know what you really are going to accept and what you are prepared to walk away from. Like I applied for a job and all of a sudden they asked me, well, will you take it as an interim? And I knew I wouldn't. And I said no. And then the answer was, okay, it's not interim. But you just think about those possibilities in your head and just have the confidence, because I think that is a limitation that many of us put on ourselves.
I think thank you for that input, because it is a really good point that oftentimes we will accept what is offered instead of pushing back on what we want. So great insight. And so that is a good lead in, Juliet, to your question. That back to this comment that Linda said, looking at the list of qualifications, right, and not applying or thinking about what the gap is. A statistic I think a lot of people are aware of is that basically, you know, women only apply for jobs that they meet like 100% of the criteria in the job description, versus men will apply if they only meet 60%. Can you speak a little bit to the challenges that you see specifically for women around the hiring process, job descriptions, anything related to that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I will say first, every company is different. You know, they treat, if you're looking at a job description, some companies will list that you have to have these required skills. Some say these are desired skills. Some don't have requirements. They just have a full on just, you know, this is what the role is like. If you're interested, apply. So again, every company is different. And so if there's a company that you have been following and you're so interested and you want to, you know, be part of their team, find them on LinkedIn, find a recruiter on LinkedIn or a talent acquisition person and reach out and ask, do you typically have minimum requirements for your jobs? If you do, you know, I'm interested in XYZ. You know, ask if you can have a copy of a job description and look at if they do have requirements. Make that your kind of your roadmap to get to that position, right? So I personally think that having minimum requirements, again, this is a personal opinion. I think it's a barrier. So, but it's something that I also understand why we have minimum qualifications, because there's a connection to how we compensate for the relevant experience. So again, my mind, if I could just allow you all to go into my mind and look at all of these details and puzzles, like there's so many puzzle pieces in my mind and how everything just interconnects. I just wish it was so much easier, but it's not. Okay, so then if we're talking about let's see, like personal experience, talking with friends and family, the biggest challenge for women, I think, is putting yourself out there. And I will say, you got to know your worth. You got to be able to articulate who you are, what you want, what you need to be successful in the workplace. If you don't, it's okay. It takes practice. Talk to friends, talk to your mentors, practice your, like, who are you? What's your identity? For me, I'm a Filipino American woman. I'm a young professional. I mean, I hope I can say I'm still a young professional. I don't know what the age cutoff is, but you know, I'm a young professional navigating my way through Oregon. I'm originally from California. I come from a diverse state. I come to Oregon and it's not. And so I'm learning how to navigate all of this, right? So, you know, it's okay to not know what you want, but what you have to do is come up with a plan to figure that out. If you don't know, send me a connection on LinkedIn. We'll get you there. Like a few years back, I interviewed a woman. She wanted to get back into the workforce, and she was a stay-at-home mom for years. And her kids, you know, they finished high school, a few of them off to college. What I loved in her interview is she was so passionate about, you know, just getting back into the workforce. And it was just the way she articulated her story. She was confident. She had a plan. And it was then, this was, I think, 3 years ago. And I remember just reaching out to all of my you know, girlfriends that are stay-at-home moms, just saying, when you are ready, I got your back. Like, you send me your resume, we're going to get you back in the workforce, right? And so I immediately became an ally for stay-at-home moms wanting to be back in the workforce. Gosh, I feel like I went off on a tangent, but if you want me to clarify anything else, let me know.
Well, because we're running out of time, which doesn't, you know, that's pretty standard for women. We usually run out of runway when we're talking.
Yeah.
What I would say is to synthesize some of that is what I'm hearing you say, and I think one of the big things that we discussed offline as a group was, right, the fear of failure. And women think when they apply for something and they don't get an interview or they don't get the job, right, it's failure, versus understanding it's a process, right? And so What I believe, I mean, here's the good news, everyone on the call. If you are interested, you've had a number of people offer to be resources and give you feedback. But I think what we want to do is there's no way to increase equity and compensation for women if we don't apply for jobs that stretch us. So we really, even as a duty, not just to ourselves, but to our community, need to apply. And Julie, I guess one last thing I'd like you to comment on is, let's say someone lists a requirement. I mean, I can tell you in a hiring position, and maybe sales has more flexibility, there are some requirements, but what I found is a application or a resume isn't going to necessarily tell me that. There's those intangible qualities that will allow me to offset what someone has listed as a requirement. Can you just 30 seconds or less give your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I will say at Oregon Lottery, we are pretty strict when it comes to requirements. So if we're hiring for a job that requires 3 years of supervisory experience in a specific function, the way I evaluate it, I'm going to look at a resume and application, and the resume has to be very clear, the month and the year, and what were the duties that you had, list accomplishments. And if you manage, and if it says supervisory as a requirement, I'm going to look at your resume and I'm going to look for, okay, how many people did they manage? How many years were they a supervisor? So it has to make sense and tie in. So if there are requirements listed, make sure that your resume reflects that. And if a cover letter is, if you can add a cover letter, use your cover letter as an opportunity to tell your story, right? Because the resume doesn't tell the exact story. There are times where I create the story and I'm like hoping that this is the person's story. And then when I call for a phone interview, they then validate all of that, right? So make sure that if the requirements are there, your resume reflects that, or the cover letter.
Okay, we are down to 3 minutes, ladies. So I want to make sure we get to a particular topic because I think this is important. One thing I've noticed in my career is, in general, you get much larger raises when you leave one organization and go to another. Can we address the topic of how does someone in their current organization enter into the conversation with their leader on this topic related to money? How do they shore this conversation up? Linda, do you mind taking that? And you're gonna have to keep it to like 60 seconds.
Sure. I would hope that I try to establish the relationship with that person that I work for from the start. So there's regular meetings and conversations all the time, so that I'm not going in there the first time and hitting on the salary, on the compensation. But either way, not to be afraid to bring that up, to bring it up in a way to talk, like I think it was Juliet that said, know your facts, know your information, and come in and put it out there. Talk about what you've done, where you are, your accomplishments, that kind of thing. But it has to be pretty head on, but also calm too, and not emotional, and kind of know again what your limits and what you want to say. Like, don't go too far with that conversation. If you have to stop back and think a little bit and kind of gather your thoughts together again and come back, but don't give up on it. If you feel that there's really an inequity there or something, to keep going. Hopefully that person will be fair. And at some point you might have to make a decision that is it time to move somewhere else. And like Sasha said, go for another job. And then, that might be the way to more compensation. So that was as short as I could make it. There's a lot behind that, but.
You did a great job. Thank you. Appreciate that. And just the reason I bring that up is the last 2 jobs, I gained 20% on my base. So it told me that I hadn't been keeping up my eye on the ball related to what the market was and my value. So that's the reason I bring that up. T2, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, I guess, actually, if I'm looking at the clock.
Okay.
What would be your advice on that topic?
So have a mental number, BATNA, better alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? You have to have that number in your head. I'm not settling for less. And that's pretty much what you want to do. You know your worth, you know your self-worth. So make sure that you stick to it. If it's a little give and take, that's fine. But otherwise, you know your worth. And so there's always an opportunity. So go for it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Juliet, I see you're putting some things in the chat. If you aren't following the chat, she's put some resources in there for you. Do you want to make a quick comment?
Negotiation Genius, that's a great book. I read that in business school, that talks about your BATNA, and it is just really great. So that's all I'm going to plug in.
Awesome. All right. I was committed to ending this on time. We're almost there. We're closing in on our witching hour right now. So really quick, this was the first part of a three segment series. The reason we broke it up into 3 segments is exactly what you just experienced here. This is a really tough topic. There's many components to it. So basically the third Wednesday, is it Wednesday? Yeah, third Wednesday, we're going to be doing the lunch series between 12:10 and 12:50 with different types of panelists. Our next one will be in July, and the dates will be sent out here shortly, but I can't remember right off the top of my head. But at the end of the day, we will be having that, and we're going to talk about building your value and advocating for yourself. So if you're interested in this topic, please join us. Feel free to provide feedback through LinkedIn to anyone in this group or to the SIM group, where we accept that feedback, and we would love to hone these sessions so they become more valuable to you. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a lovely week and go advocate for yourself when it comes to this topic. Take care. Thank you,
Bye,
ladies,
all.
for joining
Thank
us and for
you.
all of your input.